Morning YouTube, and welcome to RV Daydream. Today's pretty decent, but it's definitely cold. As you can tell, I got a jacket over my trash bag solely. Still got my trash bag.
What have you been up to?
I've been riding on a daydream.
Well, we're kind of doing the opposite of spring cleaning, some kind of fall cleaning. Heidi's inside helping my son. He's rearranging his room. We're clearing out some stuff out of the refrigerator of the RV that's been in there for a long time, because we've had the refrigerator on this entire time it's been parked. And I got the truck running because I'm going to turn it around in the driveway here, and I'm going to take a look at the brake. As some of you suggested, I think it was Charles Howard. If I get that wrong, sorry. But anyways, yeah, I did the brake hoses on his van because of the same problem. Those hoses collapsed inside, and I think that's what's going on here too, possibly. But we're going to pull that wheel off and take a look. I got the tire, wheel off, whatever you may want to call it. Tire and wheel. And this brake still was kind of wanting to hang on a little bit tighter than what I wanted it to. And I took the pry bar here and I was prying on the caliper to try to get it to come away, and it seemed to want to force itself back onto the caliper to some extent, or onto the rotor to some extent. And I know my sliders are good, I know my brake pads are good. I redid all that. I put new rotors on here even. I put new bearings in the front. However, this brake line, this brake hose, which I kind of suspected was the problem, I'm pretty sure this is original, because there's a date on there. I know you guys can't read it this way, it's upside down, but basically says DOT, and then there's a couple of letter numbers there. I'm not sure what that is, but that clearly says 0597, and then I think that says 1/8 of an inch. I'm pretty sure that's what that says. But 0597, there's no mistaking that's a date. So this truck is a 1997. So I'm assuming that this hose was to be used by then, or I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I do know that before I go and replace the caliper, which again seems to be in very good shape, whenever I did do the pads, I cleaned everything off, I redid the sliders, and everything moved real freely. So I'm going to assume it's the hose. Heidi's got a couple of those at her work, so that's what I'm going to be doing. I also found that the truck has a little bit of an antifreeze leak, and I'm not exactly sure where it's coming from. I noticed underneath that the weep hole that is on this lifetime warranty water pump that I have on here, the weep hole has a little bit of antifreeze coming out of it also. Now, here's the thing. I don't drive this truck very much, so it could be that that's just antifreeze that's getting past one of the seals whenever I fire it up and run it after it's been sitting for some time. Or it could be that the water pump is failing. It's hard telling. Now, I wanted to go to a high volume water pump anyways, because this poor water pump's working its butt off, pushing all the extra fluid that I added when I went to this 4-core radiator. And this 4-core radiator is only supposed to be a 2-core radiator. So there's a lot of extra fluid that has to be pushed through this engine, and it could be that the water pump would rather cavitate or push it out of the area of least resistance, which could be the seal in this case. So there may be an upgrade happening here on the water pump, which is not a big deal. I replaced the water pump again when I pretty much first got it. You can see it's October of 2015, and it's a little bit easier to do now because I got rid of that oil cooler deal that was from the factory and went to that aftermarket oil cooler. So that's not a big deal. If I had to replace the intake gasket, which that's this here, that's the intake manifold, that may not be too big of a deal either. It's just I'd rather not have to do any of that. The truck is doing just fine the way it is. This is part of me being anal though, and not liking the fact that there's a couple of drops of antifreeze coming out after it's been sitting for a while and I run it. That's one problem. The second problem is probably associated with the first statement that I made about being anal. If I decide that I'm going to replace the water pump And if I decide at that point it's a good idea to replace the intake manifold, then at that point I'm going to think, well, it's probably best just to pull the heads off and look at the heads to see if maybe they need to be redone. I mean, they've got a lot of miles on them, 180,000 miles. I could drop them off at a shop. I could have them redo the valves, resurface the heads. At that point, if I've got all that off, I might as well put it in a new cam and timing chain and gears. So you can see where it just kind of snowballs from there. In the meantime, I still have a truck that starts, runs, drives fine, and I can run the crap out of it and not have any issues other than those couple drops of antifreeze. So now you guys get the picture, huh? And of course, we've been talking about a new truck anyways. That's still up in the air, and there's no sense in doing all that work if we're going to go that route. So I'm going to leave this be and adjust the brakes, or fix the brakes with the correct the hoses. I think we need hoses. Well, I'm in the middle of all this, and just like everything else, you've always got issues. Look at this thing. You had to cut it to get it out. I've got this line on, but the problem is what I keep on talking about, these old trucks and how things get affected by winter so heavily here. So let's do a little example of thing. My son's 1988 van, which is 9 years older than this truck because it was kept in climate control. When I did the brakes, every brake line, every fitting, every connection came off exactly like it was supposed to. There was no twisting of the brake line when the fitting was trying to turn. There was no corrosion to speak of. There was no rust built up in weird places. And the retainers for the brake hoses, they weren't all rusted and basically chemically welded to the frame. Fast forward to this truck, all those things I just mentioned is going on with this truck. So I've got Heidi going over to the parts store that's right over here, which they're all in the same company. I don't even know how that works. Advance Auto Parts owns CarQuest, and everything I buy from her work says CarQuest on it. But for her not to have to drive, she's walking over there and getting the brake line that I need, because the brake line, which had already been replaced at some point, that crossed over to the passenger side, the ends were they stripped out real easily, and I've got a good wrench that normally does a really good job on that. So that needs replaced, and the brake line that goes from the master cylinder down to the first junction before it runs over to the passenger side, that one needs replaced too. Yeah, it's real sad. Let me show you some of the rust. Here's some slight flaking already on the radius arm mount. The radius arm itself is starting to get pitted a little bit. That was an issue on my F-150. This actually broke pulling into my driveway one day. That's a major problem. And then you can see the coil spring, it's lost its coating here as far as the plastic coating that was on there originally, and the coil spring itself is getting a little bit rusty. It's just little things like that. It just starts building up, and there's no solving this. There's no solving this if you live in this state and you drive in this state, as well as many other Rust Belt states. It's going to happen. I've gotten used to it, but it just burns me that it's something that I can't fix. I mean, the only thing you can do with these trucks is when you first get them, just spray them down with some sort of a coating, some sort of maybe not an oil bath necessarily, but there's a lot of other things that are out there that are similar to oil bath, undercoating sprays and stuff like that. Get it done. I mean, it's really the best thing to do. Now, that's something that the van also had done. It had Z-Bart back when Z-Bart was a thing, and you could tell. I mean, it's not as fun to work on underneath because everything has just got this layer of goop on it, but it also isn't all rusted out. So I'm going to think about maybe doing that this year if I'm still in this crappy weather and I'm driving this truck. I'd rather just take and put the truck up in some sort of climate control, but it's, that's maybe not the best thing for it either, because then it sits without driving. You got to go out and start it all the time. climate control is expensive for storage in the winter up here, because most people do that with boats or RVs, and even then, who knows, is the guy definitely keeping it, you know, at 45 to 55 degrees in there all the time, or sometimes it gets shut off? It's really hard to say. So I'm going to finish this up and hopefully get this thing back straight. Oh, by the way, one of the things that took a little bit longer was some reason my sway bar bushings, which I just replaced all those bushings, pulled out of one of the sway bar end links. I'm not sure exactly why, but I had to press it back in, and hopefully it stays this time. That's kind of odd. So I replaced the brake lines. I was getting ready to take it for a test drive, and looky here. Looky. Look at the leak. Thing is, with leaks, what you got to do is find out the highest point in which they're leaking. Now, it's not coming from the water pump C-pole like I thought. I wonder where it's coming from. Huh. Oh, it's coming from over here too. Go ahead and move this around a little bit. Alright, I'm not exactly sure what happened, but my camera went dead. I didn't shoot hardly any footage, but it was cold out here today. Maybe it died because of that. So the deal is the lower radiator hose clamp, even though I know you probably can't see it in there, but it's double nutted. I've got 2 nuts on it. Let me see if I can zoom in. And it backed off. For some reason it backed off, so I had to tighten it, and that was it. I'll have to keep an eye on it. Maybe put a different nut on there, because one of them is a nylon nut. It must have got so hot though that it backed it off. Hopefully I got something better to show you than me just working on this old truck. There is a reason I'm getting this truck ready though. That's all I can say. Don't do it. Don't do it.